Chris Glinski, welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you came in.
Yeah.
You've got a very interesting story, and we talked a little bit about that in when I was at No Longer Bound, just touring with Ben and others. And then after in our prep call before this, it's there's some similarities in our trajectory in our youth, but you've got a real fascinating story. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is about your story, going through addiction, but more importantly, getting through it,
Yeah.
recovering, and then thriving. And your story is just so wild. And this is the similarity, is about you going back in and helping other men at the place that saved you or got you on the right path. And so we'll talk about a lot of things in this discussion, but this is going to be all about you and your story and how it can help other people too. So before we dive in, I want to open with a round that gets right to the heart of what we're talking about. And so it's kind of more of a speed round, but true, false. So I'm going to give you a statement. You tell me if it's true or false, and then you give me any explanation that you want.
All right.
All right. Most men who end up in addiction knew years before they hit bottom that something was wrong. True or false?
That's a good question. I'd probably say false. I'd say false. One of the hallmarks of addiction is denial, and I think that we can be blinded by some of those issues. A lot of times it can feel like, it's everyone else has the problem and it's not me. And I think we have to kind of like tread lightly around that narrative, because it's not that, we're victims or we're solely the problem or anything like that. But there's just a lot that goes into addiction, I think, before you get to that rock bottom.
Here's another one. Addiction is primarily a willpower problem, a choice a man could reverse if he just decided to.
100% false. If that was the case, the Reagans would have cured addiction with their just say no.
Just say no. That's
Just
it.
say no.
It's easy as
It's
that.
simple. And it's been such a positive shift, right? We had this moral model of addiction for so long where it's like, willpower, bad people make bad choices. And what we've learned, I think since kind of mid 2000s to now, and just how much, media is just covering addiction more and more since like 2007, 2010 is that it's an actual disease. And they've kind of, I think we've shifted that perception that, it's not just that we make bad decisions. There's actually something going on in the brain, nature and nurture, definitely, and environmental all play factors into what kind of cultivates someone to choose to destroy their life with drugs and alcohol.
No one goes into it looking to create all this pain for themselves and people that love them and all that sort of stuff. But willpower is such a shallow, irrelevant point to this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's because you're trying to deal with something. You're trying to cope with something.
And it's one of the hardest, and in just my experience of working with men in recovery, in early recovery, it's one of the hardest things to get them to shift on. Is when it comes to staying sober, it's not just like, well, I just won't drink, or I just won't go, to the bar. And there's not a lot of preparation or relapse prevention planning or coping skills in place, because they think their problem solved because I just won't choose to do that. And it's like, that's great. Like, be strong, be confident. Let's also be smart about our recovery, because life is going to happen again. And life can be challenging. It can be tough. It can be difficult. We don't know what it'll throw at us, and we may not always be strong. And that's okay. But let's have a plan in place for when that time comes.
Yeah. I had a friend that I used to work with years ago, alcoholic, he's been sober for some time. His wife had a malpractice medical suit. They came into a lot of money, buying cars, bought a nice house, all this sort of stuff that they had none of that when they, before that event. And he was doing well. And I think, I don't know what happened, but I think there was some sort of, I'm okay. Like, I got this.
Yeah.
He got a job as a bartender.
Yeah.
What do you think happened?
Rationalizing and justifying, enough time has passed. Maybe that I can have a healthy relationship with alcohol now that all this time has passed and I've done some healing. I've, have healthy bonds and connections with family and friends and things like that. But, and so a lot of guys kind of encounter that thought of like, well, maybe I can have this healthy relationship with alcohol, or they're legalizing marijuana. Maybe I can just smoke a little weed and be okay. But, if in AA, right, like if you are a true addict or alcoholic, one drink is more than enough, and 1,000 is, or 1,000 is not enough, and one is too many, right?
Yeah. And it's not at that point, it's not necessarily it's not the same reason. They're not doing it at that point for the same reason they did it originally. Maybe they are, or maybe they've just gotten comfortable with where they are and they think they can handle it and they're just trying to test them. I don't know what it is. Or just there's a crack in their temptation that it hits them.
Yeah. I'd be, I did private practice counseling for a while outside of a program. So these are people who, typically went through some sort of program and have some sustained sobriety, and they want to continue counseling. And we would talk about that a lot. And my question to them was like, why? I'm just curious, like, why? Like, well, it would, and a lot of times it came down to some type of like bond or connection with something, right? Well, I'd feel a little more included with the group if I could just go out and it's like, well, does that mean you don't feel included with a group right now, or you don't feel as like those relationships are as strong? And if that's the case, then you're still looking for that alcohol or whatever it is to kind of fill that need. And so I try and like peel back the layers of kind of like why that is, because whether you can or can't, it's incredibly risky for people like me and people like us.
I was just at an event this past week, and one of the guys, I said, "Hey, are you having a drink?" I had a drink, and I'm like, are you gonna have a drink? And he's like, "No, I'm good. I'm trying to not to." And I'm like, "Say no more," because you don't know what their relationship is with it.
Yeah,
they could be recovering. They could be, just one day away from not having their last drink and just trying to. And so I was just like, I get it, bro. I'm not gonna say no more.
Yeah.
That's your journey. That's your decision. And frankly, even if you don't, a lot of people feel like alcohol doesn't do me any good anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's just better to stay away from it. Another true false. A man can get sober and still not be ready.
True.
Now, is that he can want to be sober, but not ready emotionally, or he's not in the right place to? It's not a safe environment yet for him. He wants to, but he's just not in the right spot yet, whether it's mentally or environmentally. He doesn't have access. He wants to, but he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I look at it in terms of, different parts, right? And that if we listen to the language that we use, we talk about these parts, and we talk about them frequently, right? Like a part of me wants to make sure I wake up on time and go to the gym, but this other part of me wants to hit that snooze button 8 times and eat, 6 Dunkin' Donuts or Krispy Kremes. Ooh. Right? And so, we have those parts that cause a lot of tension within. And I think what happens is when we relate to those parts, we can kind of be like shaming of one, right? Like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or I should be more like this. And I think that leads to kind of an erosion of our self-esteem and confidence and how we feel about ourselves. And so in terms of sobriety and being sober and am I ready or not, what I've found is that both are pretty much true. There are parts that are ready to be sober. I'm tired of the pain, the destruction, the consequences. I'm tired of feeling this way. And then there are other parts that, that are like, but what if I don't have that? Then I gotta feel all of this, and that's overwhelming. How am I gonna deal with my anxiety? How am I gonna deal with my sadness? And so a lot of what we do in therapy is just trying to reconcile kind of those competing parts, if that makes sense.
It does. And like you mentioned readiness, and that seems like they want to do it. And you could just equate it to every day right now. A lot of people want to lose weight. They want to, but are they ready to?
Yeah.
Are they ready to do the work that's required to do it? Or do I just take a pill for it? Or, like a GLP-1 or a shot or something of that nature. But the readiness is such a big piece of it is they may not be there yet. And there's going to be a part of your story where I think you got to the point where you were ready.
Yeah.
You're like, there's kind of a playtime, Wild West going on. And then there's a little bit of okay, enough is enough. I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the most important part of that, we call them the stages of change, right? From pre-contemplation to contemplation, all the way to action. The most important piece of that is whether they're ready or not, that they're talking about it with someone. Because if they're talking about it with someone, then we can at least work on moving through that and helping them get ready.
Another stat just came up. So we posted this on the purposMANproject channel, is 1 in 3 men don't have someone that they can talk to when life falls apart.
Yeah.
1 in 3 don't have a guy that they can confide in.
Yeah.
And most don't confide in their spouses, of course, or their girlfriend or something like that, especially when they're dealing with some inner turmoil.
Yeah.
But isn't that wild? I mean, is that common, the guys you encounter, that they don't have anybody to talk to about it?
Yeah. It's pretty common. I think that's just like kind of culturally how it's been, right? Stoic, be a rock, right? The protector, the strength of the family, and show no weakness, because weakness is vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to threats and danger. And so I think a lot of times, we shut down a lot of those emotions outside of like anger. It's just uncomfortable for a lot of men to kind of feel that and talk about those things because of this stigma, or how we were raised, or whatever it is. There could be several different things, but I mean that stat doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. I think it is getting better. I think we are doing a good. I think we can always do better, but I think we do a good job of kind of challenging that stigma.
Can someone be sober, clean, but still be bound?
Yeah, we call them like dry drunks or sober addicts, right? It's those people who they may not be using their drug of choice or substance, but they're not working any type of recovery program. And if you don't work a recovery program, you don't get kind of the fruits of it, right? You don't have gratitude. You don't have purpose and meaning. They just kind of go through life a little bit miserable, bland. And so, we see that.
And I think too, when I toured the campus, there's a kind of a fitness center area, but there's I think a observation just so that men aren't using that space necessarily as their outlet.
Yeah.
Right? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's one that sometimes we get wrong, sometimes we don't. But we're gonna, you know, we're gonna find things, right? People, one of the phases in the program, you know, one of the goals is that, you know, failure of the flesh, right, is what we call it. And it means that just because you don't have your substance and you're not using drugs and alcohol does not mean that you won't grasp at things to get that dopamine and instant gratification hit. And it may be, you know, overworking, like working out too much in the gym because it gives you validation, because people acknowledge you and say like, wow, you're strong, or you may get a smile from a pretty girl when you're walking past in public and that feels good. You know, food is a big one, right? Just kind of like the overeating. So we'll find things, and even for guys not in a program, right? Like pornography, sex, that kind of stuff. Like it's just as destructive as using, at least to our body and like our brain, you know, as using drugs and alcohol. You may not have like the legal issues, or you know, you may not like be pawning jewelry or things like that to get your fix, but I mean, you can definitely be bound and kind of a slave to those things as well. And all you're doing is, you know, the goal is the same, and it's to pacify a need. I don't like the way I'm feeling right now. This will make me feel better in this moment, versus sitting in the uncomfortable.
And so where are you steering people? So if there's like, hey, I'm trying to do this to keep my mind off of this particular thing, this addiction, this event that happened. So they go to other areas to put their energy. Mm-hmm. Where are you saying? So if you're like, hey, it's okay to have a healthy balance of that, but don't pour yourself into it and let that be your recovery. Where are you pointing people to? What foundation are you saying, hey, you can distract your attention, or you could put yourself in energy in so many different areas? Here's where you need to put it, or here's where you need to focus in order to truly recover.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like behaviors, we're constantly assessing and looking at, you know, is this a compulsive behavior? Like, are you doing this to avoid doing or feeling a type of way? If the answer is yes, then we can kind of dive into that and see what need isn't getting met, and then create a treatment plan around that, or create a kind of like a plan of action of working towards reconciling that. You know, really at No Longer Bound, you know, we're a faith-based ministry, you know, residential program. And so we are constantly pointing people towards God, and spirituality. We believe that you cannot have a sustained and successful recovery without that peace. Because without that spiritual peace, you can't have purpose and meaning. And if you can't make purpose, or you can't have meaning around like, why did I have to go through all of those things, and you can't answer that question, then we've failed you, right? Because you got to be able to answer that question to make sense of what's transpired.
And for a lot of these guys, you're in a lot of ways rebuilding a foundation or creating a foundation for them. And what better place than God to create that foundation?
Yeah.
And then build up the man from there.
Yeah.
So that was helpful, like intro rapid fire. So I want to get back to your beginning.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really the only way to understand what you do and why No Longer Bound works, is really just to understand the guy who walked through those doors years ago. Take me back to the beginning, not to the bottom, but to the beginning, even earlier.
Yeah.
What was going on inside you as a kid when, in your family dynamic, that influenced who you were at the time?
Yeah. So, you know, we're from the North, Chicago, and my, you know, my dad and mom, they got pregnant and married real young. So like 17, you know, by the time my mom was 19 or 20, I think, you know, she had my older brother, me, the middle child, and then my younger sister. And so 3 kids, you know, high school education, it was tough for them. So, my mom basically stayed home and took care of us, 3 kids under 3. I got 2, and it's challenging enough. I can't imagine a third. I have some newfound empathy for my mom on that now. But my dad, he had to work. So he worked, I think it was like 3 jobs. So he would leave before we were awake. He would get home after we were asleep. So, I don't really have too much recollection, just kind of like stories people told me about how I was, and I was really colicky. Just needed a lot of attention, needed a lot of soothing. And so that kind of continued until we moved to Georgia in 98. So I was like 6 years old at that point. And, still kind of the same. I was just very irritable. And I don't know if it was I didn't get the attention I needed or what it was, but it just didn't feel. I just didn't feel good. And I knew that from a young age. I was angry. I would fight a lot, and it was typically issues with my family, with my dad, with my mom, and my siblings. I would go to friends' houses and things like that, and they'd always come back and say I was the most well-mannered and well-behaved kid. But I mean, I was a terror. I was a rancid kid, doing crazy things, and just wouldn't listen. And bless my parents. They were young. They probably, I think looking back, probably have some regrets or some things they wish they did differently, and vice versa. But, ultimately, I started, going to school, fighting a lot, getting suspended. I was just an angry kid. And I didn't know really what I was angry at the time. I don't know if it was, I didn't measure up or I didn't feel loved. I know, my dad wasn't around as much. I know my mom kind of had her thing going on, to make extra income for us. And she would babysit other kids, a handful of them. And so I know a lot of attention, even into like my adolescent years, was kind of on that. And so, home just never felt like home. And as, an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, I don't understand the concept of how I get food. I just know it ends up on a plate and in front of me at some point in the day, and I like that.
Magically arrives.
I don't understand that. My dad has to go to work to put, make the money to put food on the table for us, so that way we can eat. Like, now I know, like as an adult, like, oh, like he's a provider. He's doing that because he loves us, because it's his responsibility. But, as an 8-year-old or a young adolescent, you're just kind of thinking like, what's going on? Like, where are my folks, right? So I spent a lot of time out of the house with friends in the neighborhood, and I think it was probably like 12 years old when I first like tried and started smoking cigarettes, and it was just kind of like this occasional thing, really just peer pressure, curious about it. Really enjoyed kind of the buzz of it, and didn't think anything of it though. But what really changed, I think, was I was either 12 or 13. I was in 7th or 8th grade, and we were in the gym class, and we had just gotten done with the volleyball unit. And what held up the volleyball nets outside were like 1.5 foot high metal rebar stakes. And I remember I got tackled on one of them, and I split my knee open. It was like 70 stitches. Oh, it was wild. But 2 things came from that. I mean, I got a ton of attention. Just everybody, I didn't cry, so everybody thought I was like the most like BA kid. Like I think they were like,
Most
whoa.
numb emotionally kid.
Yeah, right. Like they were like, wow, this dude's tough. This is a man, right? Like 13 peach fuzz, you know. And then you know, but I also was prescribed. I don't know if it was the first time, but it was the first time I remember some painkillers, some opiates, and that was when I was like consciously like I took them, and consciously I was just like, this feels different. Like I don't feel this chaotic energy internal anymore. It was a weird. It was weird because it was just like this switch that, you know, where everything made sense all of a sudden. Because before it was, I had all this anger, I had all this anxiety, I had all this, you know, frustration, not having the emotional capacity to understand that there's, you know, all that stuff is fueled by hurt and shame. And then I take this thing and all of a sudden there's a switch and I don't have any of that. And it was like being like cloaked in like a heavy warm blanket. And I was just like,
And you really didn't know that. You didn't really know what was making you cause or what made you felt angry or just the tension that you had inside you. You didn't really know yet at this point. This is how old when you first?
13.
So 13.
12, 13.
So 13, you're exposed to the painkillers, made you feel something like you hadn't felt before, and it kind of put some of this tension at ease. But at that point, you still didn't even know what was causing the tension.
Yeah, I really didn't find out about kind of that stuff until I went into treatment and I had a professional and somebody who had kind of walked that path before me point some things out.
So how much of it now, or, you know, when you started going into treatment, looking back at that pre-13 years, was it related to like your parents? You know, was dad there? Was dad not there? Was when dad was there, was the interaction just off, contentious? Mom divided attention, working. They're both doing the best that they could with what they had at the time. Can you look back and go, that's probably what was part of it, was the family dynamic and my relationship with them or the absence of them?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely like played a big part. I mean, addiction has run rampant in the family tree, at least on my mom's side of the family a lot. And just with, you know, her dad. And so, you know, I didn't know at the time, but like, I knew that she had experienced some things and seen some things growing up. And so I think that with dad not being there and then, you know, mom a little, not like emotionally withdrawn from us. Right. And so it just, if I felt any type of way, it just felt like that, you know, I wasn't, nobody was going to like come to help me deal with those emotions. And I couldn't figure out how to deal with them.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it was a lot of internal issues that was projected kind of on my mom and dad and not really understanding, you know, or having empathy for kind of what they were going through and what they had to deal with.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I'm 12 years old, 13 years old, right? Yeah. But no, I mean, they were pretty contentious relationships. It was just a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing. No like crazy abuse or anything like that. There wasn't anything where it was like capital T trauma. But again, I think as men, you know, we kind of minimize our pain because it's not capital T trauma, but repeated messages around like, hey, you're too much. You overwhelm me. That can really hurt somebody long term if that's continually the narrative you hear about yourself. And I was a very overwhelming child. I just was, and I don't think my parents were equipped well to deal with that in a healthy way.
You said there was addiction ran in your mother's side of the family too?
Yeah.
Was she involved in some way on her own? And it was like, how much of it is the environment, was she clean, sober,
Yeah.
or okay?
No, yeah. I mean, we were raised in church. I mean, my dad, you know, hates the stuff, obviously, from just how addictions impacted my brother, me, and what that's put him through. And my mom, I think she kind of went the other way with it, like seeing kind of my grandfather, who's an alcoholic, and seeing kind of like the trauma from that. She kind of went the other way with it. But no, I mean, they are not addicts.
Good. You described a moment when you stopped being curious or sampling to almost like a switch happened. And you described that switch when you injured yourself, you got on painkillers. Was that the clear starting point for this journey of substance? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, because I started like looking for things like that. I mean, we would, garage hop and take beer out of people's garages on the weekends and experiment with that. We would kind of go through pill cabinets at our parents, whether mine or my friends. And so it kind of became this like green light to like, okay, let's find other things that make you feel that way. And I just kind of took that and ran with it. And I tried plenty of different substances, but for me, it was really kind of like the opiates and the painkillers. That was kind of that was what I was looking for.
And
something to quiet me.
And so you were on the path now, and this is kind of from age, what, 13 to...
Yeah, 13. Again, just being young and in school and all that stuff, like the use was pretty sporadic. It was really just weekends. Yeah. And when the opportunity presented itself, really, I think kind of 17 years old is when it was like, oh, this is a full-blown addiction.
And before we get into that chapter of your life, what was it like with your parents when you were 13, 17, you're dabbling? Obviously, probably the relationship is not changing a whole lot.
No, it's getting a lot worse. Because now I got a lot more things to lie about. They don't want me smoking or drinking, and so they're catching me doing those things, and then they ground me, and then I kind of just walk around giving them the middle finger and doing them anyways, and they don't know what to do. And so it's just more and more, I think, fractures in the relationship during that time. So I think it did get a lot worse during that period of time.
And it seems like such a tough age where there is you're getting older, making a lot of your own decisions. And as parents, there's no playbook. And so you're like, I don't even know what to deal with this. We know friends that have had kids go through addiction, and they're just like, we thought we raised them right. We thought we were doing all the right things. And then like, what happened? And then they start to blame themselves.
Yeah.
And then there's this conflict within them and this guilt and shame that we let our kid do this. Like, it was because of the way we parented that we did this. Maybe there's some contribution, without their knowledge, kind of like those early years. But how much is it really, how often is it that parents are feeling like that?
I think it's a pretty normal feeling. I think for most parents that aren't like, that are able to have like a healthy range of emotions and empathy for someone else, I think it's a normal feeling for a parent is to want to protect and save your kid. And as parents, the expectation is we are the protector. I've new kids, and I'm like, I would go to the ends of the earth. I would do whatever it took to make sure that kid did not feel any ounce of pain. And if he does, I'm just going to sit there and question, like, what could I have done better? And I think that's just instinctually how we are as parents. I think that's the way God designed us. And so it's a very common and normal thing that families often feel. And what we have to remember in recovery and through counseling, and even if the individual is using substances doesn't ever get the help they need, I think it's still important for the family to get to a place of, it's not about guilt. It's not about placing the blame on whose fault is this. It's about understanding. And when we understand and we can have empathy and compassion and recognize, okay, we could have done these things better. We could have, done this differently. Then I think we get to a place where conversations can be a little more constructive, right? Because if it's just about blame and guilt, then it's just resistance, right, between both people.
So if there's a parent that has a kid going through this right now, kids like 15, 16, still pretty influential, still under the roof of the parents, what would you suggest, or what have you seen? What would you give your parents advice if you were back in that age? What would you say to them that might give them, like, hey, do X, Y, Z, or try this, or just have a conversation? Like, what would you say to the parent who's like in that right now?
Yeah, I would say a lot of boundaries and a lot of love. I think a lot of times we get a lot of boundaries right, and I think we miss out on a lot of love. And so kind of what I mean by that is, there's got to be rules. There's got to be consequences for behaviors, and when we act out, and when we, if we're doing things that are harmful to ourselves, right? But I think a lot of times we can miss that follow-up of like, hey, I still love you. I know you made all of these mistakes, and I gotta, ground you for a week or whatever, or you can't hang out with this person anymore because you got caught smoking with them, or you got suspended from school, so you're gonna need to do these things. But I want you to know I still love you, and that no matter what you do, that won't change. That piece will never change. And I think we miss out on that piece because we're so focused on the behavior. And what that piece does is, as children, we internalize everything. Like I gave the example of like the food, I don't understand the concept of food. I'm just wondering, like, why isn't my dad around to play with me, right? So we internalize things and make it about ourselves. It's just developmentally, we don't get that skill until we're a little older. And so if I'm being punished for something, it's like, oh, I'm bad. Like that's why I did this. Like I'm bad. And so we need to be able to speak to that narrative. And I think the a lot of love piece is a way we can do that.
Is it too late for a parent that maybe they're like, I failed my kid. They're too far gone. Is it too late for a parent to do that, to have that conversation with them? Hey, there's going to be boundaries, but I love you. Even if they've not said it.
No, not at all. I mean, we have guys who are there that are like 50, 60 years old that no longer bound, and, their families come to family recovery. They hear these messages and they kind of practice what we're talking about. And so that's the thing, we carry around shame, and I'll quote Brene Brown because she's way smarter than I am. But she says, shame needs 3 things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. And so the only way to deal with shame is we have to bring it into the light, and we got to talk about it. And so if I, as a grown man, when I'm hurt or feeling a type of way, can go to my dad and say, I'm really struggling with this. I'm really struggling with this aspect of, my marriage, or this is really difficult as a parent. I don't know what, and for him to say like, bro, you got this. Look at what you've done. Look at what you've accomplished, or you could try this, right? And it speaks to that, right? It speaks to that shame of me. Am I failing? And it's like reassurance that like, no, right? So I think normalizing those conversations, and it's never too late to, and that's with like the nature and nurture debate. It's like, yeah, nature has an important piece in addiction and mental health and all that stuff. But my experience is you can always, nurture that stuff out. So.
And so there's going to be scenarios where people don't have that encouragement or boundaries or love, or parents have just said, hey, I don't know what to do anymore. Throw their hands in the air.
Yeah.
What was it for you that got to that sort of, advancing your story? Was there a point where it was like, okay, we don't know what else to do with Chris?
Yeah. I mean, I think basically kind of like once I got out of high school, that was the turning point of, you got to follow our rules or you can't live here. And I mean, they had tried everything. I mean, they had tried, prayer and church and God, and that wasn't working for me. They had tried punishment and consequence. They had tried rewards when I would do well. They tried making sure I had employment, opportunities at college. They tried everything, but and maybe that'll help a parent feel maybe not better, but a little more kind of calmer or reassured that, like, at the end of the day, it was on me. But yeah, so I mean, through using drugs throughout high school, and once getting out of high school, working, making my own money, kind of able to have a little more freedom to kind of go as I please and do what I want. Started getting arrested, and my family, they bailed me out the first time. They probably bailed me out, like, they enabled for a big part of my early addiction with just bailing me out of jail and giving me money and things like that. Like, they definitely enabled for maybe like a year, but eventually when they realized the enabling wasn't working and they couldn't fix me, that's when they just kind of threw their hands up, and it was like, you got to figure this out, and we can't have you living in our house. I mean, I was stealing their money, things like that. So I think my grandfather was living with us at the time. So I had left I remember one time I had left some syringes and dope in my pocket, and I'm an 18-year-old addict with an enabling mom, so she was still doing my laundry.
Yeah.
And she had found, I guess my aunt or somebody had found that in the dryer, and they were really concerned that, like, what if my grandpa would have found this or something like that. And so definitely inappropriate, leaving drugs around the house and things like that, just not good. So they eventually were like, you can't live here, you got to go.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first step on their own kind of like healing journey, was like, okay, we can't fix him. Yeah. If we could, we would have found the solution by now.
Yeah. They tried everything they could. They poured into you.
Yeah.
And at some point, I think a parent, sometimes even friends, just get to a point where, like, they don't want help. And there's so much of, like, us dealing with stuff in our own lives is we got to get to a point that only we can change it. That despite everyone's best intentions and their love for us, for some reason, we just, like, that's great, but that's not going to change me.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to let your kid, or sometimes let them hit rock bottom in some way before they actually change. Like, it's that teachable moment, or it's that shift that happens in their life that only that moment can happen.
Yeah.
Or only that moment would shift their story.
Yeah. A big question we ask all our families in our family recovery program is, we hope that this works out for your son, your husband, your brother, whoever, your loved one in the program. We hope that they get the healing they came for, they stay sober, they never use drugs, they have a happy and successful life. What are you going to do if it doesn't work that way, though? How are you going to be okay if they continue to do, drugs and alcohol? Because everybody's responsible for their own health and their own healing, and we got to prepare families for that, because it's a real possibility.
So that's a rhetorical question you're asking them. Be like, hey, if you've not thought about it, maybe you do. You're not giving them an answer, but it's almost like you're getting them to think about, hey, if, because they're a grown man, if they don't do this, prepare yourself, right? Or how are you going to deal with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but also like vice versa is that like to the person in the program who has a very unhealthy family member. It's like, hey, what if they never change? You got to make sure you protect yourself and
To the guy in recovery.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're having both those conversations of like, and all it is, the hope is that they're empowered to take control of their own health, right? Their own wellness. Because so often, you know, we become a mesh. The family system is, especially with addiction, is how I feel is related to how you're doing. And that's dangerous because then I'm powerless over how I feel. It's completely up to whether my loved one is doing well or not. And so we try to, differentiate the individuals in that family system.
Yeah. So walk me through the moment where your story takes a bit of a shift. It seems like it happened nearby.
Yeah. So, like I said, I thank God I wasn't a good addict. I got arrested a lot. I think I spent most of my addicted years actually in jail, which I believe kept me alive. Because what I was using was, overdosing and things like that. So, but yeah, so I'd been on probation for a couple years, violated a bunch of times, house arrest, done all that. And they were kind of like smaller charges, like underage consumption, possession of marijuana a few times, underage consumption a few more times. And then after that, it was just failing drug tests at every probation. And so I'd get sanctioned to jail. But it was November 13th was kind of like the day where a lot of things changed. Me and my friend at the time went down to Atlanta to go pick up some drugs. And on the way back, we're on 400. We kind of pass Windward Parkway. There's a cop sitting on the highway, and he starts following us. And so I get off at the road. I get off the next exit. He's still following us. I'm driving a couple miles down. He's still following us. No lights on or anything.
This is your car. You guys are driving.
This is my car. I'm driving. I had just gone to, talk about like after having like some success and then like having that thought of like, I could do this, right? That we were talking about earlier. I had just gone to probation that morning and passed one of my first drug tests at probation. And I thought to myself, like, I should celebrate. Like, that's how wild addiction is like, I just passed my first drug test. I'm not going to jail. Let me go get high to celebrate. It doesn't make sense, but
that's wild.
In the moment,
That's wild.
I was like, this is the greatest idea I've ever had. And so, either, I don't like to speculate, but either this guy I was with, told them, or, they had someone positioned somewhere in Atlanta and kind of radioed them or whatever, but they basically followed me until I'm made an infraction. And so I was smoking a cigarette at the time, and I thrown the cigarette butt out the window, and he pulled me over for littering, which
yeah, like whoever has gotten pulled over for throwing a cigarette butt out the window.
Yeah, and I was in so much denial that I had a problem at the time when I first was in jail for that. People were like, "What are you in here for?" I was like, "Littering."
I threw a cigarette out the window, and I'm
They're
in
like,
cuffs.
"Littering? That doesn't make sense." I was like, "Yeah, but they found dope in my sock, but it was the littering that got me in here, And so I get pulled over. Doesn't even ask for my license or my name. He just says, "Mr. Glinski, step out of the car." So he knew he knew something was up. And like I said, I had been on probation in Forsyth County and caught up with them a bunch of times. I was a trustee for like a couple months in the jail for a little bit. So I knew a lot of them, the cops and that kind of stuff. And so, they asked me to step out. searched me. Like I said, they found the needles in the car. They found the dope in my sock, and so I went to jail. And they called my probation officer. She came down, and she was so mad. And we had such it was a weird relationship. It was kind of like this like she didn't mess around. Like she was very but I could tell she was she really wanted me to be well, right? That's all she wanted. And so she was just so disappointed. I remember being like, dang, I gotta tell Francesca. She was from New York. We called her Frankie. I gotta tell Frankie.
Shit, what do I tell Frankie?
I know, right? I was like, she's gonna hit me. I need protection. But so that was November 13th. My family's been out of the picture. I mean, we would talk on the phone occasionally, but I'd been sleeping in my car or on couches when I could at friends' houses. So my parents, they didn't come visit me in jail. And my goal when I first got there was, okay, I need a fresh start. I clearly cannot meet the requirements of the justice system because I keep getting put back in jail, meaning probation. I couldn't fulfill probation. I couldn't pay my fines. I couldn't drug test clean. And so my first thought was I'm just going to do the time. I'm going to serve out the remainder of my sentence, which was it was 13 months or something like that. I think it was a little over a year on probation at some, RSAT program, which is just rehab through the kind of prison system. Mm-hmm. And I'll just do that. I'll get out. I won't be on paper. I won't have to do drug tests or anything like that. And I can just move forward with my life, a fresh start. Spent Thanksgiving in jail. That was sad.
Anyone visit you?
Not at that time. It wasn't until maybe a week or two after that, a friend who I had used with growing up came and visited me, and he had actually gone through No Longer Bound in 2011. Mm-hmm. And so this is end of 2012. He had gone through the program a year and a half before. He was on staff at that program now, and at that time, and he came and visited me in jail, and he just kind of, he gave me some tough love, some accountability of, I really think you need treatment. I think you need to go to No Longer Bound. This is how it's impacted me and changed my life. I think it could do well. I think you'd do well there. And, I just had sad eyes, right? And I looked at him, and he did not have that same kind of empty, sad look, right? He looked well. He looked fulfilled. He looked happy. He was genuine. He was empathetic. The way he carried himself, right? I guess the kids would call it aura these days, right? Aura farming.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah.
Aura maxing?
Something like that.
Maxing, aura, I don't know.
Yeah. But he just gave off that, and I didn't know what to call it. And I just remember, leaving that visit and being that looks cool. I wonder what that is. And
that's aura.
Yeah.
That's aura.
Yeah.
You're I don't know what it is.
I don't know. Yeah. And I was just kind of the thought started churning. Okay, maybe I don't want to spend the next, year in jail at some prison treatment program. Mm-hmm. Maybe I want to go to No Longer Bound. Maybe I, want to do this. And, so I was toying around that for a little bit. And then the county came and was we'll offer you drug court. And so I knew about drug court. I knew it was, you have to go 2 to 3 times a week. You got to take the classes. You got to pay the fines. You get drug tested frequently. And it's not that I wanted to use drugs in that moment. It was just that I didn't feel confident in my ability to not use drugs and to be able to pay fines and hold down a job that allowed me to go to court 2 to 3 times a week. And so what I know now about the program is a great program. It works for people who have the resources and who are serious about their recovery. I was not one of those people at that time. And so, but the way she framed it, was awfully sweet. She was like, we'll let you out tomorrow. You just have to enter in our drug court program. And I was like, I had that thought, like, I could go out, I could leave jail. I was like, that sounds really nice. And then whatever, God doing for us what we can't do for ourselves, just kind of like taking over. And I was like, if you let me out of this jail cell, I will be right back in. I need treatment. I need to go to No Longer Bound. And it was like, I was just like, what did I just do? Well, I could have gotten out. And so,
Was that the easy door? If you said yes and went through the drug
because I could have just done what I had been doing, what was familiar. I could have, I'm sure I had every intention of staying sober, but the likelihood was very low that I was going to be successful at that. And historically, I wasn't successful at that.
So you knew that. You knew if I just took the easy door, where it was going to go.
Yeah,
right?
But when you're sitting in a jail cell,
it's tempting.
Eating brake pads is what we called them, and you're like, I get to go.
That was steak.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Mystery meat, and you're like, well, I can not have to do that, and that sounds pretty sweet. Because there were a lot of barriers to No Longer Bound as well. They have, at the time, a very intense interview process. You got to do an application. You got to write a letter. They interview. You got to be accepted, and then you got to pay for it. And I'd been in jail. I didn't have any money. My parents couldn't afford to help me out because I'd taken advantage of them multiple times, and they'd spent tons of money just bailing me out of jail and that kind of stuff. And so I couldn't deal with that. And so, that was the next big hurdle. But that was kind of like the moment where it's like, all right, I'm going to go to treatment. And so luckily, growing up, we were regulars at, Free Chapel, and my dad knew the pastor very well, or pretty well. And the Free Chapel did a lot of work with No Longer Bound. They would always go to the graduations and things like that. And, financially really supported the program early on, just with donations. And so Free Chapel and No Longer Bound were well connected. And, my dad was talking with the pastor one day, and, he had asked, how's Marsh, which is my mom, Marcia, how are the kids? And my dad just broke down. They were in public, and my dad just crying. My mom had just left my dad. This is, I was in jail. I think my brother was, he kind of doing it. My brother, he's in recovery now and sober and all that. But at that time, I think he was using as well and just messing up like I was. And so, everybody's falling apart. My dad's like, I don't know what to do. Chris wants to go to No Longer Bound all of a sudden. I don't have any money to do that. He's in jail. I don't know how we're going to get him out. And, the pastor just looked at my dad and was like, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And sure enough, I get a response back from my letter, and they're going to interview me. And so now all of a sudden it's like, okay, this got real. Like, I have a shot at something different. And so I had to be accepted into No Longer Bound before I went to court, because we had to like proposition that, like, hey, please let me into treatment. I'd been to treatment before and it didn't work. And so, it was kind of like a long shot that they would go for this. Probation was pushing to have it revoked and for me to serve my time because of how many violations I had. And so they were not wanting me to go to treatment. They were wanting me to pay for my crimes. Understandably, there were a lot of them. And so the interview was intense. I'll never forget it. It's, I'm in jail in an orange jumpsuit through glass. This other guy, he don't mind me sharing his name, but Steve Hill, just military man, probably like 6'4", big girly beard, just like intense.
Total operator or something, right?
Yeah, yeah, just like intense. And I mean, he just starts kind of going at me. He had all this background information that my friend had sold him, who was working at the program, who came and visited me in jail. Like, was like, hey, Chris has been doing this, this, and this. So he knew all of this stuff about me stealing money from people that I'm like, how does this guy know this stuff? And I'm just sitting there kind of sobbing, just like, oh my gosh. And he asked me this question, like, do you love your parents? And I'm like, yeah, of course I love my parents. And he's like, well, what have you done that shows that you love them? And like, I was just stumped. I didn't do anything. I didn't have an answer to that question. And he just said, well, do me a favor, man. If that's how you love people, don't love me, right? Like, you gotta figure out what that is, because that's tripping you up, and you need to figure out what love is. And he just looked at me and he just made the mistake of, or not, he just asked me the question, what do you want if you come to No Longer Bound and enter our program and complete it? Like, what do you hope to gain? What do you want from our program? And again, I was just stumped. I didn't have words to describe what I wanted. And so I was just, through tears, crying of like, I just want to be happy. Like, I know what I feel now. I know what I've done. At that time, I with the like identity and shame, like, I know who I am, right? And they weren't good names. And I know I have those things, and I know what gets me those things. I know now what leads me to those things, and I don't want them anymore. But I don't know what's on the other side, and that's kind of scary. I know I don't want to feel like this. He's like, all right. So they end up accepting me, which I'm, eternally grateful for. Program was paid for, which was amazing. Went to court, kind of pled my case with the judge, and just kind of shared where I was at, shared a lot about what I kind of had just said about, I know what, what the life I've been living leads me. I know where that leads me and what that gets me, and I don't want that anymore. And it's tough because I've said that 7 different times before and with different judges. But the crazy thing is, and it's like, in the big book, it says nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And the judge who was supposed to be over my case, like, was out that day. The pastor meeting my dad, like, just so many, like, there's no way, this is too much to be a coincidence. Like, this is God ordained. And, the judge just, he gave me the sweetest deal. He mandated me to 12 months at No Longer Bound, which is what I wanted. That was the duration of the program. Any amount of time I spent going back to school and college would go towards my 280 hours of community service that I had, or something like that.
Just a bank of it stacking up of community service?
Yeah. Any amount of money I paid towards tuition or money paid towards treatment for me, right, would go towards my court fines.
Oh, interesting.
So basically, court fines were already taken care of because the program was paid for me by someone else. And so, there was incentive to get sober, incentive to go back to school. I had a lot of incentive to give this a real shot and to get that kind of like fresh start. And so I think it was December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, shipped over from a Forsyth County Sheriff's Police car, handcuffed, taken to No Longer Bound, let me out, and I admitted that day. And I was so happy. I was so happy to be in treatment. I was so happy to be out of jail. My nickname for like the first 2 weeks was Chris Kringle, just because how happy I was, And so that was the day my program started.
2 months prior, November 13th, where were you arrested?
Right across the street. Yeah. No Longer Bound sits in this business park off Shiloh Road and Old Alpharetta. And No Longer Bound's right here, and this business park's like right here. And I had littered my cigarette butt right there, and they pulled me over here, and I was arrested. And I was just sitting in handcuffs, just looking at the No Longer Bound campus. And I grew up like a mile and a half down the road, so I knew what NLB was, and I knew the program. And we had gone to Free Chapel, quite a bit. And so I was very familiar with NLB, and it was just, one of those God ordained things again, just kind of like all signs point to NLB, literally, like in that
Literally,
moment.
you were facing it.
Yeah.
Coincidence?
No.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe in coincidences anymore.
Especially how that all unfolded.
Yeah.
And when you shared that that's where you were arrested, is across the street from No Longer Bound, it was just...
Oh, it's wild. Yeah. I mean, it's been nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah.
That's the only way to explain it, describe it.
Yeah. Man, so you drove past the No Longer Bound campus growing up. You were arrested in the parking lot across the street. You graduated from their program, and now you run it clinically.
Yeah. So once I finished the program, I went into their internship program, which is kind of like their aftercare program. We call it the SLT, Servant Leadership Training now, but it's kind of like you're in, like, and even, it's biblical. The 12 steps talk about it, but service work and the importance of being of service to others. And so I had gone through such an amazing life-changing transformation at No Longer Bound. I mean, I really grew up. I was 20 years old in the program, when I went there. And so I felt a calling to really give back, and I wanted to. And so in that aftercare program, that internship, I was able to go back to school and start on my undergrad, and eventually, get some certificates along the way in addiction counseling through GACA, which is Georgia's kind of like accrediting counselors association. And so, and then eventually, going to get my master's at Mercer in clinical mental health counseling. And so I had kind of worked my way up on staff after I was hired on as like in marketing, where I would go around and tell my story, help with fundraising, talk about, like logistics, things like that, oversee, like the different systems and databases that they had, because I was very like type A personality. And I was really good at that stuff. Very organized, very methodical. But I felt a lot more fulfilled when I got to like interact with the guys in the program, to help out in the groups, just kind of talk to them. I felt that was a lot more fulfilling for me. And so I knew I wanted to do something in that space. And because I'm methodical and type A and like to learn and things like that, I was like, all right, let's go back to school. Let's do it. Which was scary at first, but turns out school's pretty easy when you're not high and you just put in the work. So that was good. And yeah, so I ended up getting my master's, and went and worked at another treatment program for a little bit. And I actually came back on staff in last year in May as the clinical director.
So just take us just a quick second and just like, how does it feel when now you're kind of in the motion of working there, you've gone through the program, all that. So some years have passed. Have you stood on the campus and just reflected on, can you see the parking lot that you were arrested in from, campus?
From my window, my office.
So it's like kind of a reminder in some ways, but have you just, has it hit you, absorbed it, appreciated it, that experience? Like, what does it feel like today to be on the campus and reflect back on your journey?
Yeah. we had a graduation on campus about a month ago, and I thought, let me bring Lainey, my daughter, my 7 months, and Kristen can stay home with Liam. I'll take Lainey, go sit at the graduation, and I was just sitting there, and I don't think anybody saw it, but I mean, I was just tearing up, just like, make it make sense. You spend still the majority of my life, right? No, I'm 34. I don't know math, but I spend a big part of my life thinking about all the stuff I deserve. It's all terrible things for how I acted, for how I treated my family, how I treated others, how I treated myself, the things I said, the things I did. It's like, man, I don't deserve any of this. And before, right, the narrative is like, that's a very like how shameful I felt feeling those things. But sitting there at that graduation, it's like, it was like the most love I've ever felt. It's like, I don't deserve any of these things, and yet like, God still loves me enough to give me that. That's insane.
How special was that moment to be there with her?
Oh, so great. It was so great. And she's I'm sure every parent says this, but I mean, we have the cutest kids, and it was just, it was special. It was amazing,
Yeah.
And I try and reflect on that as much as I can. It's hard when it's bedtime and they're screaming, and I'm like, but the more I can reflect on just my journey and that kind of stuff, I just have so much gratitude. I mean, that's the word that comes to mind, every day. I try to every day. I'm not perfect. It's just gratitude. Yeah. Thank God we don't get what we deserve.
Right?
Yeah.
And as a parent, and those nights when the kids are screaming and they don't want to take a bath, they don't want to eat, they're overtired, they want to go to bed, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Before you know it, you're going to be opening a whole other chapter. And that's cool that you were able to have that experience with her and that graduation. And when you're at Free Chapel, you said you saw these graduations happen there too, right? Were they?
Yeah, but that was when they were now we have the graduations on campus. We have a lot more space now, bigger buildings, and it's easier for families and the guys in the program. Yeah. So
you guys have a great campus over there, and I've seen it grow over the years.
Oh, it's crazy.
It is wild.
It's cool.
How the community has invested, the staff has grown.
Yeah.
Give me 2-3 minute commercial on No Longer Bound, but not the brochure version. What's happening on this campus that's transforming guys' lives?
Yeah. I mean, three things: relationship with God, relationship with self, and relationship with others. We call it the three-legged stool, and it cannot stand unless all three legs are intact, meaning we can't be successful in our recovery unless we have healthy relationships with God, self, and others. And so what we do at No Longer Bound is we teach healthy bonding and healthy relationships. One of the first things when I arrived on that campus is that everybody, all the residents, all the staff came up and gave me a hug, and they told me they loved me. And I thought, this is the weirdest thing. What did I sign up for? They're going to make me drink some Kool-Aid. I'm like, this is insane. But culturally, once I really understood what it was that kind of that represented, was that these guys don't even know me. And that, even when they found out the things about me, they still would give me hugs and tell me, that they love me and things like that. And so, culturally, that's what we do is we build those relationships. We learn how to have, healthy, authentic, genuine relationships with other men, with families, with, with ourselves and how we feel and think and believe about ourselves. And then, all that, with God.
That's got to be a little kind of awkward when you go on and guys are hugging you, but you're probably at some point going, why is it like a bunch of strange dudes just hugging on another dude? Like, what brought all these guys to this place where they can find that in themselves to do that?
Yeah.
That's probably one of the legs of the stool, right? Healthy relationship with God.
Yeah. 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 Because it started out as, Mike Harden driving to Atlanta, picking a few people up and taking them to the No Longer Bound property and just feeding them dinner and doing a Bible study in his house. That's how it started in like 93 or 94 or something like that. And now it's grown to this where we have, 66 residents on campus. We have tons of staff, 5 therapists, like 10 recovery specialists. I mean, we're a whole program now.
And how many guys do you have at any given time?
So we have a 56-man dorm for our core program, and then we have 16 transition beds, and we should be opening up an additional 12 beds in the basement of one of the houses for aftercare as well. So we can have up to 56 guys in our core program, and then 28 or so in our aftercare program.
What all else is on the campus, right? You're talking about the guys, you're doing therapy with guys, they're having group time together. What else is available to the guys on campus? Because they're there for the first several months.
Yeah, I mean, they live on campus for the entire year. Yeah. And so, we have pickleball courts. That's a big thing that they love. We have a basketball court. We have a pretty nice gym, free weights and machines. And so we understand part of early recovery is finding, sober leisure activities and having hobbies. A lot of our hobbies when we're using we're doing them high, or we're not doing them at all because we're depressed and we don't find joy in them. And so that's a big part about rediscovering yourself. And so we do a lot of hikes and things like that. We have what's called the John Thompson Training Center. So in there is going to be 3 classrooms. We have some staff offices. We have a computer lab. So they'll do leadership classes in there. Guys will be able to use the computers to, some vocational training, like updating resume, applying for jobs when they get later in the program. And so we have that vocational training aspect as well. We have our Cars for Recovery program, which I don't know if it still is, but it's probably advertised on 104.7 The Fish. You may have heard it. But yeah, so people with kind of like cars that they don't use or need or broke down or need work on, they donate. And we have a 4-bay garage auto shop, and guys in the program will work in that industry and learn how to basic things about cars. But a lot of our guys leave and go work at some of these places, car dealerships around here and in their garages. And so that's been helpful. And then we have our Hardin Hall, named after Mike Harden, our founder. But it's just a big meeting space with a commercial kitchen, and that's where we have all our meals and things like that.
I noticed when I was on campus that there was definitely, I don't think you mentioned this, there was this brotherhood that's going on. Guys supporting guys, and it felt like an unusual place because usually guys don't have those kind of relationships.
Yeah.
So what is it about that kind of that brotherhood aspect in that environment that you all are creating that maybe complements the one-on-one that you do with them or your team does with them? I'm sure that both have tremendous value, but what is it about that brotherhood that Think back to the 1 in 3 guys that don't have anyone that they can talk to. Why is it so important to be in that community with other guys?
Yeah, and I would argue that it's infinitely more important than my
one-on-one.
one-on-ones with some of these guys, because when I think back just on my own life, but even the people that I sit across from and I'm doing therapy with, and they're telling me about kind of their hurts. When you boil it all down, it's all due to some type of relationship, whether it's perceived rejection, shame, but it's because of this, people are going to see me in this light, right? We hurt in relationships. And so if we hurt in relationships, it means we have to heal in relationships. And so I think the brotherhood acts as that kind of avenue for that healing to happen, is that we can share the most shameful things about ourselves, but instead of being judged and chastised for them, people are going to say like, oh, me too, or oh, I love you anyways. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, you're still my bro in my book, right? And so, like I said, we're our biggest critic in that when we hold that stuff in and bottle that stuff in, I think we're internalizing it, where we have the worst narratives about ourselves. But typically when we are able to voice that around a healthy support group, we're met with love and compassion and empathy. It kind of speaks to that narrative we tell ourselves, and it kind of undoes some of that.
I don't know. It may feel different. Like, is it different when a guy is doing life alongside another guy and feels like he can confide in him in a way, maybe because they see so many similarities between them, that's different than a guy talking to their spouse or talking to a parent? It's just different, right?
Yeah. I think so. I think we're always going to have kind of like our predispositions kind of in there, and we assume different roles based on the environment we're in. And I can be completely honest and transparent with my wife about things I'm going through, what I'm struggling with, what I need help with. But I still have that hat on of like, I'm the husband, I'm the provider, this is the expectation. And so, I wonder how much of that, and I'm just kind of like doing some self-reflecting right now. I wonder how much of that is really raw and unfiltered compared to some of the conversations I have with some of the guys, because they may understand more so. I mean, especially with addiction, right? If I voice cravings to my family or to my wife, they don't understand that. They look at me like, how could you possibly want to use? Look at everything that's done.
Yeah.
But when I, to somebody who's been in it and I voice it to them, it's like, yeah, they're real.
I know what you're talking about.
What are we going to do about it? Right? It makes total sense that you're going to have some cravings. And so I think there is a level of kind of like been there, bonding that can happen with other men. And again, I think it's just that different side of kind of culturally what we've been brought up in.
And part of it is like you're talking about, can you have that raw discussion with your spouse? Maybe not. Part of you is trying to preserve it and protect that. You don't want to put that emotional weight on her.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's another part that says, I just need a dude who's on the same level or who knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, my spouse has never been there, but he has. Or even if he hasn't, he's somebody that I feel like I can just spill out to guy, and you're going to connect on that level and confide in one another. And
Yeah.
even if you don't fix it, you just got a brother who knows what you're going through.
Yeah.
Because he may go through his own struggle of some sort, his own temptations, his own whatever he's got going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he can relate in some way as being a guy in that point of life or responsibility or the weight that all guys carry.
Yeah.
That there's some comfort in similarity. And
and I think it's good to just have a variety of people you can confide in. And I think, specifically with men, I think, I mean, some of the guys that I talk to and spend time with, most of them are all people who have been associated with No Longer Bound in some sort of way. Like the guys I went through the program with, I still keep up with some of them. But the alumni, I mean, a lot of them they're the people I talk to when I'm struggling, because they aren't going to sugarcoat what they see, right? If it's my ego, if it's my pride, if it's my, whatever it is, they're going to see it because they know kind of those, they've been with me for a long time, so they can call me out on it. But on the flip side, they're also going to say like, I love you here, whatever you need.
I just want to go back to one question. You said at one point that you just want to be happy.
Yeah.
When the guy from No Longer Bound came over. And you said that in the jail cell. So maybe you had been thinking about it for some time. What was it like to say it out loud?
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah.
Because, that was the, that was the first admission of there's a problem. Which is crazy because I'm in and out of jail and don't have any money and homeless.
Yeah.
But like, before that, I could point at like, well, if I wasn't on probation, or if I, didn't litter, or if my parents would just let me smoke a little weed, or if I did this, right, then there wouldn't be any problems. It's everyone else and everything else is the problem. It's not me. And like, I think for me to, kind of say that out loud, I think there was a heaviness to it because it was that first like, oh no, my life is unmanageable, and I am unhappy because of it, and it is no one's fault but mine.
Yeah. I know we had advanced from that, but I mean, it's just, I didn't want to leave that, that statement because it's very simplistic, but it was what you felt at the time. And it was just kind of like, and I feel, and maybe it's true that guys maybe get to that point, when they're coming into No Longer Bound, or they're actually taking a big step in recovery.
Yeah. But it also alludes to like, it's such a guy response, like, because it's such a simplistic emotion.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have the words, the knowledge for complex emotions. Like, I want to be fulfilled. I didn't have I felt a type of way if I would say, I just want to be loved. Right. Like, or like almost there's a negative connotation to that. But it was almost like, I just want to be happy. Like, although it was genuine, like, it's almost like kind of comical, of like very simple, very like, I don't know what else. Like,
Chris is a simple guy. He just wants to be happy. That's all. But couch underneath happy is, I want this pain to go away.
Yeah.
I want to get healed. I want to be better. I want something more for my life that I just can't articulate right now. But I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work. There's a lot of meat behind that, but it's almost like you have to get to a point in your life that you just make that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And, people will say it's you got to hit rock bottom. If you're still, whatever, then you haven't hit rock bottom. But, I think as therapists and clinicians, our job is to, anything can be your bottom. It doesn't have to be sitting in jail for an extended period of time. It doesn't have to be, a friend overdosing and passing away. It doesn't have to be something crazy, right? So,
I think one of the things that guys are really bad at is just asking for help in general.
yeah, I'm still bad at it.
I mean, it's like asking for directions, how to fix something. Honey, can you do this? And you're like, I don't know how to do this. Am I gonna get? You just go to YouTube, right? You just go to YouTube and there's a YouTube video for anything. But something has got to work. What's an effective way to engage a guy who's in trouble that they may recognize, but get him in a step in the right direction, get him one step in the right direction? If, does he have to be there? Is it an interaction? Is it a conversation? If somebody senses someone's in trouble and they're not there yet to the point where they want to be happy or want to be well, what can a loved one do?
Yeah. And there's a really good TED Talk from 2014. It's popular if you've been in kind of the addictive space or mental health space for a little bit of time, you've probably heard it. But it's the opposite of addiction is connection. TED Talk with Johan Hari. I don't remember how to pronounce his name, but his whole talk is basically on that. We've designed these kind of like cages that further isolate people because addiction is like a tornado. It sucks people in, it hurts, and if we truly evaluated how we feel about our loved one who's using drugs and alcohol, we're probably pretty angry and pretty hurt, right? And so he talks about like the show Intervention as a good example of this, where you bring him into a room and you threaten the last connections he has. If you don't change, we're done. We're out. There's no more, right? We cut it off. Further isolating, which further causes more addiction. So he kind of concludes that, it's connection that's going to help people stay sober and get help and be well. And so what he says is, and which I tend to agree with, is it's just about sitting with them and whatever it is they're going through, right? Again, if we could tell somebody the answers and how to do it, then we wouldn't have addiction, because we have most of the answers and we know how to do recovery, and it's just say no, right? But that doesn't work. People have to come to those conclusions on their own, which can be really frustrating. And all we can do as family is just kind of sit with them in that. Now, that doesn't mean enable and co-sign and keep giving them money or keep bailing them out of jail, but just talking with them. Hey, how are you? I think that's the biggest thing we can do as humans to other humans. I don't think we do enough of.
And just tell them that you love them and you're there for them, right? It's so that they know that someone gives a shit about them in this world.
Yeah.
That's probably part of it. They don't feel like anyone cares anymore, and what's the sense?
Yeah.
So it's important to know that someone actually cares about them and their well-being. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then hopefully, they get to a point where they already have this trust or this safety that they feel in that relationship, that maybe they'll feel more inclined to ask for help, if they know they aren't going to be judged for it, if they know that it'll be met with love, and, maybe they will ask for help. But if the narrative is constantly like, I'm so mad that you keep doing this, or I'm so frustrated at you, or you don't ever change, then why would that person come to you and say like, hey, I'm actually struggling with this and need some help. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Just be quiet, be present.
Yeah.
Love on them. So I want to talk a little bit about the different interventions or treatment options. So the addiction treatment market in the U.S. is worth over $42 billion. Men are navigating everything from residential programs to apps to MAT clinics to weekend retreats with almost no roadmap. You've been on the inside both personally and professionally now. So from 1 to 10, we'll just go through a couple of these interventions. What's the real world value for men's recovery, and then tell me why.
That's tough. When I was looking over it, I was like, man, this is tough, because I can answer it from like my perspective of what I needed, but I mean, there are guys that will not stay sober unless they are going to 12-step meetings and working a 12-step program. And so it would be like the most value to them. So it's so hard to like
pinpoint what's valuable to what.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go through a couple of these. Medication-assisted treatment, bridge to recovery, or a ceiling that prevents the real work. So medication-assisted, 1 to 10, 10 being most effective.
The most important piece of that is the assisted therapy. A lot of times people are going to their general practitioner, or they spend 15 minutes with a psychiatrist and they're like, I'm depressed. Here's an SSRI, or I'm anxious. Here's an anti-anxiety med. Here's something to help control your mood. And that's the extent of their treatment. But medication with therapy, recovery bridge to recovery, very, very valuable. If you can help stabilize and get some of those kind of emotion, if you can help get the individual within their window of tolerance, then you can do some really good recovery work and trauma work. Because if they're constantly like in this activated state of fight, flight, or freeze, it's going to be hard to do any type of therapy with them. And some guys are just, their baseline's a 4 out of 10 for anxiety, and they just need, a medication. Now, if they're addicts, they shouldn't be taking like Xanax or Klonopin. There's safe, low risk of abuse medications out there.
Yeah. SSRI, what is that?
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Got it.
So it's just, it allows your brain to access more free-floating serotonin. There's a lot smarter people that could explain it.
Yeah,
but
it's all good.
Yeah.
I didn't know what SSRI was.
Mm-hmm.
12-step AA, NA, decades of pure data, millions of members, and also a model that some men can never connect with. Where does it actually land for you in those? Some it works well for, some maybe not. They need a different type of...
I think it would work well for all, because of what works well at No Longer Bound, and it's that brotherhood. Fun fact, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like the gold standard of addiction treatment, is the 12 steps. It's like from Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And so, at any given, the ease of finding 12-step meetings, they're everywhere. They have apps. It's such a large program. And, I'm not an alcoholic. Well, there's Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. There's all the different ones. And so, it's other like-minded people in recovery with a common goal. And I think that unites people and strengthens recovery. I think there are a lot of barriers and a lot of kind of judgment or preconceived notions at some of the meetings. But I think for the most part, everybody in recovery can benefit from them.
Yeah, can't overestimate or overemphasize the value of brotherhood.
Yeah.
Like I've known people that have gone through AA, 26 years sober.
Yeah.
What helped get him through 26 years of sobriety? It's having that brotherhood of people that he can lean on, and they've been through a shared experience or a like experience. And so it's just, it can never have enough, value placed on that on brotherhood overall.
Yeah.
One-on-one therapy with a licensed counselor. So for a man who's raised to never talk about his feelings and things of that nature, I would imagine you sitting in the chair doing a lot of one-on-one therapy. That's a very valuable thing for guys to be able to get into, right?
Yeah. And we get to explore and process things. And I'm trained in EMDR, which is eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So it's a type of trauma therapy where we target like specific traumatic memories and the belief systems around there, and we desensitize kind of the symptoms of that. So it's a lot of like people with PTSD, and then we kind of install a new way of believing about that memory. So that type of therapy is very targeted. I think it's super beneficial. Um, you know, traditional talk therapy, I think it has its place in recovery. I think it is important, and I think it's necessary. Um, I do believe it's going to be working it out in their personal lives and in their relationships and at their job or at school or, whatever they're doing, that's where the healing is really going to happen, because that's where they're putting it to the test. I think therapy, we can talk about stuff, and I can give them some coping skills and like, hey, like, let's practice box breathing. But until they're like in a heightened anxious state and they have the opportunity to like practice some of that stuff and find value in it and see like, oh, this does work, this is helpful, I like the outcome of this better than spinning out for 20 minutes. So
To say, don't a lot of people hold trauma? Like, I don't know if a lot of people realize that their body and their mind, they just hold trauma subconsciously somewhere, and it bleeds through, and they're not conscious of what that unresolved trauma has done to them.
yeah. Yeah, so there's a really good book, The Body Keeps the Score, by I can never say his last name. It's Bessel van der Kolk. But his book's all about that, is that we actually store trauma in our body. It actually changes our brain and our makeup, which makes sense. You know, it's kind of like that fight, flight, or freeze response and the associations with that, and kind of like what sets off the brain. So I think as humans, we're designed to be able to assess and judge situations as dangerous. I think we needed that for survival before we had, shelter and things like that. Like, it's what makes me run faster, hypervigilance, right? I have to be, it's all survival. And so what happens with trauma is our body is especially repeated trauma, is being associated with whatever's going on as a threat. So, abuse or, relationships, if there's trauma in that, then, how can we have healthy relationships if the relationships we've had in the past have been abusive? And our brain is already telling us like, don't trust, don't, because we can't even like get to the logical, rational part, because we're already in that fight or flight mode. And so, and a lot of times we'll do body scans in therapy and just kind of notice what they feel and where they feel it. Because it is, I mean, we store tension and anxiety and stress in our body. I mean, we get anxious, our heart rate increases, we get a little sweaty. So there's definitely like a somatic component to this.
Just to close this out, we're gonna dive into one more quick section, but so no rating required on this one. But what's the one thing that men in recovery consistently undervalue that doesn't cost anything and is more predictive of long-term success than most anything that we talked about?
Can you read it one more time?
Yep. What's the one thing men in recovery consistently undervalue that doesn't cost anything and is more predictive of their long-term recovery and success than anything else we talked about as far as interventions?
Yeah, I think it's picking up the phone. I think it's for whatever reason, when we're going through something, that phone gets real heavy. And you kind of alluded to it. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but that, asking for help, being able to share that we're struggling, being able to talk about vulnerability, our insecurities, we attribute that as weakness, especially as men, and it's It's just not true. And that's what's going to keep us sick. That's what's going to keep us from experiencing the fullness of life, and having a good quality life is the inability to reach out to others when we are struggling. Um, you know, if you have healthy people in your life, more times than not, you're going to be surprised by the response. And a lot of guys will just intellectualize and be like, well, I know what they're going to say. They're going to say like, good job, man, or don't worry, I'm here with you. And it's like, yeah, you know that, but we know a lot of things that we don't put into practice. You got to experience it. You got to feel it. You got to just, dip your toes in the water. Like, knowledge is not understanding. Experience is understanding. And so being able to experience that support and having that, and having a moment to be like, that was actually pretty good. I feel reassured. Right. But it's a continuous challenge, I think, for a lot of guys.
So you described at one point to me prior to this conversation that you were standing up at the Forsyth County Drug Summit in front of the DA and the judge who sentenced you.
Yeah, I don't know if the judge was there, but definitely like DA, police officers who had arrested me, and yeah.
So what were you there to do? And
I was there as a representative of No Longer Bound to tell my story, and just kind of talk about the benefits of long-term recovery in our program, because, and this is back like 2015, we want to send people to treatment and have the opportunity to work on these things. People aren't going to get better if you just punish them for their crimes and they don't get like any type of treatment or help. And so I went there to just kind of share my story, and it was another one of those full circle moments to be able to express gratitude and appreciation for having the opportunity to go to No Longer Bound, and that I was appreciative that I'd like to think that they believed in me at the time, and they maybe it was like a one more strike type thing, but regardless, they took a chance because I didn't deserve it. And so it was just a cool full circle moment to be able to share like my story and express gratitude. Thanks for giving me that opportunity, because this is the product of recovery.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey, and be able to close the loop in that way was probably pretty special.
Yeah.
2023 data shows that only 6% of people who needed addiction treatment actually received specialty care. The gap between those in need and those who take action is just kind of staggering, honestly. I mean, it's 6%. And for men specifically, it's driven by stigma, denial, belief that needing help means something fundamental has failed. And that belief is costing a lot of lives. You know what's on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to men who are in that percentage of, needing to do something. They have not crossed that line yet. The guy's dealing with shame, denial.
Yeah.
How do you help them bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you're not alone. There other people. It feels like it's uncharted territory. It feels scary. It feels to admit that we need help, to admit that we have these issues. We feel shame. We don't want to address the shame. We think we'll be judged, or we judge ourselves because of them. And so, it's almost like this impossible hill that we have to climb. but it's not anything new. It's something that hundreds and hundreds of people are doing and going through, and the benefits of that, what's on the other side of that, has been not just for me, but from tons of people in recovery, just outweigh, right? And so nothing changes if nothing changes. And I would encourage those guys to reach out, ask for help. There's no shame. There's no shame. We all fall short.
Yep.
And so.
That's for sure. So for the person listening who loves someone who's in it, a wife, a parent, friend, who can't reach that person without pushing them farther and farther away, what do you say to them?
It's a tough one. I say, hold on, pray, keep hope, because recovery is possible. And, everything we've said about addiction and finding a brotherhood and a support group, and it's the same with the family. Find your tribe, people that you can pour into you and you can pour into, and, can help support you, because it's tough.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And so a guy who's, say, 30, 60, 90 days in treatment, they're not feeling it yet. What do you say to that guy who's, let's say he's a week into it, days into it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's probably toughest in the early days. What do you say to the guy who's in those early stages? Decision was made. Now they're on that journey. What do you say to him?
Yeah, I'd say, what do you have to lose? Because most of the time it's just that. It's just time. And time can feel like a lot, but relative to how long we were using and, getting drunk or getting high, it's a drop in the bucket. It's at No Longer Bound, at least, it's 1 year for the rest of your life. Other treatment places, 30, 60, 90 days, just stick it out. What if this does work? What if this does change for you? That's my number one advice to guys in our program, is like, hey, like if you receive any type of feedback or, insight, just ask yourself, like, what if that's right? Like, what if that's true? Because you won't miss out on if it's not true. You will miss out on if it is true and you didn't look at it. And so, we got to increase our insight, and just, what if it works? Hold on hope.
Man, just a couple other questions that I want to touch on. And these are probably the closest to home. And one is faith. Mm-hmm. And so what role has faith played in your life, in your journey? Maybe less so when you're early, maybe it influenced you in some way, but what role did it play in more recent years? And what role does faith play in guys who are going through No Longer Bound, or they're on this tumultuous journey right now?
Yeah. Well, kind of like I shared a little bit, we grew up in church, and faith in God was, and I think this had a lot to do with some of the addiction stuff as well, is that, almost like performance, right? Like you have to be the perfect Christian, or you have to do A, B, and C to kind of like earn God's love. And so faith and religion was something that was always off-putting to me growing up, because I wasn't that. I was the opposite of that. And so, I was very angry with God, and through No Longer Bound and like working on that relationship and figuring out what resentments I had towards God, and almost like getting permission to be able to be real and with him, like, yeah, I'm angry at you, whereas like my whole life I was told, like, oh, you don't be angry at God, like, you just need to have faith, you're gonna get through it, and all this stuff. And it was like kind of annoying, and like I would always roll my eyes at that stuff, because it's like, I don't know what that does for me, because nothing's working out right now.
Yeah.
But like I said, through the program, working a lot through that, and just being able to recognize those coincidences as God ordained kind of aha moments, it helped me see that he's been there the whole time. Like he has been, the organizer of my life this entire time. And it is just, I cannot deny that fact. And everything I have going good for me right now is because of him and his plan and me answering that call, right? And so I mean it's just been huge. It's been pivotal, and in a lot of ways, as like a clinician providing services to guys, it takes a lot of pressure off of me. If I continue to remember that at the end of the day, like, God's at work here and he's the one doing the healing and transforming the lives. And I'm just kind of like, if the counselors and the therapists and the staff at NLB are just the ones kind of relaying information and being that example of Christ to the guys, then God's going to do the work. And he does. And so it's it's the most important leg of that stool. Because kind of like I said at the beginning was, if we can't find purpose and meaning to why this had to go the way it went, if we can't figure out like why our pain happened, then I don't think this works. And the only way I was able to answer that question of like, why did I have to go through what I had to go through, is with my relationship with God, because he's shown me and brought me out of that like, if you didn't have your addiction, who knows? We always like to assume we'd be in a better place. If it worked out a little different, I'd have a little more money, or if I got this job, I'd be a little more happier. And we always assume that it's going to be better, but it's not always better. And so, I have a lot of gratitude for my addiction and what I went through, because it's led me to where I'm at today. And that was God that brought me through that.
That was part of your story.
Yeah.
For the guy who's doesn't have a faith background, didn't go to church, what would you want that person to know about God and how God sees them?
Yeah. I can't but help, and this is scripture as well, but like I said, I love my kids so much. Liam, Christopher, and Elaine Hope. And like I said, I would do anything for those kids, and the amount I have for them. And the Bible says, how much more love God has for you. There's, nothing that can get in the way of that. We may feel distant. We may feel like he's not there. We may feel alone. We may feel, even unaware of religion or God, but he is. He's there. He's in control, and he's working for our good. And I've seen that time and time and time and time again in my life. And he loves us regardless.
Your wife.
Yeah.
Where did you meet her, and what role has she played
in
this journey?
Oh, man. So Kristen, I met at church at a youth ministry while I was using drugs. She was one of my sister's friends, and I would kind of be in and out of church. I'd get in trouble with, drugs or something like that, and be like, okay, I got to be straight. Like, let me go to church and repent and try and be the good Christian. But relapses would always happen. So I was kind of like, they prayed a lot for me. Let's just put it that way. I mean, I was going to church high. I was leaving and going in messed up after being at the altar. So, I was kind of like, I don't want to say I had a bad reputation, but like people knew, right? And so I was, that was, like 16 years old. We kind of knew each other a little bit. But we never interacted. We never really talked, anything like that. And then, fast forward, I'm at No Longer Bound, and we have thrift stores in the area. And one of the guys who was in the program would go off campus and work at the thrift store and come back. And he went to the thrift store and was working. And he said, like, this cute girl asked, how I was doing. He came back and told me, he's like, yeah, this cute girl was up at the thrift store today. He was asking how you're doing. And I don't know why. I don't know how. I try not to figure it out, but it was just something in my heart, something in my mind was like, oh, that was Kristen. And I remember getting out of the program and going back to that church and talking with her, and it was her. She was like, oh, I was at the thrift store and I had asked about you. And I was like, okay, well, that kind of confirmed some stuff. So, at this point, I had been living with men for 12 years or 12 months, communal living. It felt like 12 years. So, even talking to a girl was like, this is pretty cool. Yeah. And so, we were hanging out, talking a little bit, just kind of whatever. And then we got cast to be in like an Easter play for the church. And she had to teach me how to I think it was called 4-step waltz. It's like a ballroom dance. So, and her little friend, was kind of playing like puppet master and, positioned it to where, eventually we started dating, and we dated for about a year and got married in 2016 and in October. And yeah, it'll be 10 years this October.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
How important has she been in, not from those early days, but even now, just with her being so much part of your journey in adulthood? What is it?
Yeah. Yeah. And this may sound like I'm
score some brownie points here, Chris. Go on.
Well, this may be the opposite. It may sound like it, but I promise it's a brownie point and it's a good thing. And I tell my guys this is like, thank God I don't always get what I want, right? Because what I want sometimes isn't always good for me. And Kristen is my voice of reason. She's my accountability. She's my biggest cheerleader and supporter. And so, and on the flip side of that, the more we love people like that person, like the more it hurts, right? So on the flip side of that, it's like, I also grow the most because of her, because I feel the most insecure. I feel the most raw. I feel the most vulnerable when I do something and I'm like, what is Kristen going to think? And every time she's like, we may fight about it initially, we're not perfect, but, at the end of the day, it's that unconditional love that like, hey, nothing's going to change between us no matter how bad you mess up.
Yeah.
And she's just an A+ mom. I could cry just talking about how great of a mom she is and how much she cares and loves those kids.
Yeah.
So
she's like the CEO, COO. She's the mama bird, mama hen, and taking care of everybody and making sure the house runs. And she's what makes a house a home.
Yeah, she's El Presidente.
That's right.
That's right. And she does it, and and she's still working, and she works, and but she's very she's very selfless.
Yeah. Brother, man, I appreciate you coming in and having this conversation. Your story is amazing, how you've come full circle, and I think there's a lot of guys, I know I see myself, there's a lot of similarities we talked about in our youth, and going through it in the late teen years, and then, I mean, your story of being arrested across from No Longer Bound, going through No Longer Bound, finding it successful for yourself, and then coming back and pouring yourself in, and now family, 7-month-old, married, 10-year anniversary coming up in October. If that doesn't give people hope, that just one day at a time, you may be in it right now, or you may know someone who's in it right now, just stay strong. There can be a brighter future for that person.
Yeah.
And you're proof of that.
Yeah. Recovery is possible, and it happens every day.
Awesome. What is, so guy sees himself in this story, loved one, here's, someone that's going through it. Where would you point them to? What are some of the resources that you would point them to say, hey, you should take a look at this? We're going to put some of the book citations that you had mentioned in our notes, but where would you point somebody to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, they can always reach out to us at No Longer Bound. We have a family recovery program that's open to the community. So family members who may not have a loved one in the program can actually come in and sit in our classes on Sunday. If they want to talk to me, they can just call up there and ask to speak to me. They can shoot me an email, which is just chris.glinski@nolongerbound.com. But, we got tons of resources. I mean, Forsyth County, Alpharetta, Metro Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, it's got a lot of good recovery happening. And so you got, 12-step meetings all over the place, Al-Anon for families. There's parent recovery networks. So I could definitely help connect with any of those.
Plenty of resources. It's just whether you're the guy or you're the loved one, just take one step, one phone call, one conversation, just start the journey. You don't have to think about how do I do this? How do I finish it? Just start.
Yeah. Even if it's just, I don't want any answers. I just need someone to listen.
Yeah,
that's all it takes.
Well, a little tradition we're starting, or we're continuing, and you had no forewarning on this, is every guest that comes in poses a question to the next guest. And so you will have the opportunity to answer the prior guest's question to you. You don't know their background. They didn't know your background or who you were, but they'll ask a question. And so on the flip side of it, you'll also ask a question that we'll note, and the next guest will have to answer it. So some of these questions can get quite interesting, depending upon who the guest is. So question is, if you could only give one piece of advice to yourself at the age of 21, what would that be?
I'd say keep grinding. 21, I just wrapped up treatment, starting school. And there were a lot of days where I felt like quitting. There were a lot of phone calls to my mom, to my dad, just kind of crying, just like, I'm done with this. I don't want to be here. I want to come home. And each time it was like, just put one foot in front of the other. Just take one step. And man, I'm so glad I did.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. How'd that feel, bud?
Good.
Great conversation, man.
Yeah. I hope I've met expectations.
It's your story.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was I've told it many times in different formats and things like that, and so pretty familiar to me. And I always get just amazed at how I can still get choked up at certain parts of that. But it's like,
that's part of your story.
It's real.
Yeah, it's part of your story. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly valuable that that you're willing to have the conversation again and again.
Yeah.
And maybe it does surface some stuff along the way, but it's almost like you'll get to a point in your life, and you're probably starting to get there, or you might be there, is that your experience is valuable to someone else.
Yeah.
And what you've gone through is going to be valuable to someone else. And now you're entering parenthood, and you're going to go on that whole journey.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're going to be looking for people ahead of you who've like, hey, what was this journey like when you're, in it in months? Yeah. He's 22 now.
Yeah.
Right. And his brother's 20. And so it's almost like you're always learning, and you're always just gaining wisdom from the next generation or from the people who are ahead of you. So
yeah.
Same way, man. There's going to be people who are in it, dealing with whatever addiction, that could be looking to you and your story and see themselves in it and go, shit, if he did it, then maybe.
That was one of those thoughts I had too when my buddy George came and visited me in jail. Was like, oh man, this guy was way worse than me.
George?
And, he was way worse, and I was like, if he could do it,
anybody can do it.
I could do it, right?
Yeah. So who was in the car with you on driving up 400?
This is a kid I went to. So I went to like South Forsyth High School and, South Forsyth. And at the time, South Middle merged and like River, a different middle school opened up, and it kind of split them in half or whatever. Okay. It was a kid I went to middle school with, but then we went separate ways. And then I honestly don't know how we reconnected or anything like that. And,
What's he doing now?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I went and hung out with old friends right after I got out of the program one time. And if my old friends see this, no offense. It's not that they were like pressuring me or that I just didn't feel like this was adding anything to my life. George said it best when he got out of the program. He came and hung out with us before I went in jail, and he said it best. He said, I'm no longer bound. I'm in this bubble, and I'm working on myself, and everything's changing for me. And I get out, and I expect everything to kind of change in that same way. And I hang around you guys, and nothing's changed. I was like, this guy's a jerk, but he was 100.
True,
he was honest. Nothing had changed. We were still, getting high and whatever, doing nothing with our lives. And so, that was,
It's almost like you have to separate yourself. And one of the guys that was in the, I think he was like month 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
He had said that he knows he can't go back. I think it was Savannah. Can't go back because it's too easy. The same people are there. The same corners are there,
Yeah, it's literally people's, places, and things. Everything has to change. And it's tough, especially for the younger guys, because that's their life. That's all they've known is, their friend group. And so that's a big challenge.
You got to separate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if you wouldn't mind, jot your name, today's date, and whatever question. What's today's date, Ryan? You know?
It's the 12th.
12th. And then a question that you would pose to the next person. You can make it as hard, as provocative as you want. It's their problem. They'll have to answer the question. Nice. Man, well, thank you.
Yeah, enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me out.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did. Yeah, I appreciate you coming in.
Sweet.